Welcome to Bedtime Stories with Dad. So, for the first story, this is a story about Madison and Chloe. They were two identical twin sisters. And as identical twin sisters, you can imagine they fought like crazy. Madison was the smart and clever one of the two, and Chloe was the athletic and sassy one of the two. And between the two of them, they caused nothing but trouble for their parents. So, their adventures began when they were in junior high school. As seventh graders, the two of them had a science fair project, and the two of them begged their teacher not to put them on the same team. They wanted to have other partners. They didn't want anyone. They would take anyone except for their sisters. But as the fates would have it, their science teacher said, "Madison, Chloe, I have watched you two fight all year long, and I am sick and tired of it. So for once and for all, I want to see you two work together as a team." Well, what their teacher didn't know is that for the last 12 years, Madison and Chloe had done nothing but fight. And there was nothing that their parents or anyone else could possibly do to stop them from fighting. Well, on their first night of working on their project, they had to decide what their science fair project was going to be about. They had to come up with a hypothesis. Oh, you could hear them shouting and screaming and breaking things from miles away from their house. Their parents stuck cotton balls in their ears and put headphones on their heads and had noise-canceling devices installed in their houses just to keep the place quiet. But Madison and Chloe would hear nothing of it. Now, the good news is they did not take it to physical violence, but they would yell and scream and go back and forth to each other. Well, they could not come up with a hypothesis, except for this. Chloe started by saying, "My hypothesis is that identical twin sisters have to have one strong one and one smart one, and the strong one will always win." Well, Madison said, "You're on. We have now got a hypothesis that identical twins actually have separate strengths, even if they share the same DNA." So they said, "Well, now we're going to need an experiment. How will we create one?" And they decided to have the feats of strength and the feats of talent. So they created a decathlon, 10 events, 5 which were about strength and 5 which were about intelligence. And they decided that in order to make this fair, it couldn't just be the two of them as identical twins, that they would have to search out the world to find other identical twins. And as they traveled around and found other identical twins, what they found was people fighting everywhere. All these identical twins had all this in common, and they shared so much and were so close, and yet they fought tooth and nail. So finally, when it came time for them to take all their research, analyze it, and create the graphs and the presentation board for their science fair, they suddenly realized that they had done one of the largest and most comprehensive scientific researches around identical twins. They suddenly realized that they didn't just have a hypothesis that proved their conclusions, but in fact, they found something that could be useful to researchers everywhere, as it was about the DNA and the differences in biology in terms of how their life went on versus their environment and what life they were leading. So, wouldn't you know it, when it came time for them to have the science fair judges come through and they presented it, they spoke together almost in unison, almost like they were identical twins. And the entire day of the science fair final, they got along. They were able to overcome their differences in the spirit of their science and research. And when the awards came out and they won first place in the science fair, their science teacher was there with the blue ribbons to put onto each of their blouses. And the science teacher smiled and said, "Well, it looks like my hypothesis was true too." And they all laughed and had a wonderful time. And they lived identically happily ever after. I hope you sleep well. Love you.